Go into executive. All right, we'll call the meeting to order tonight with the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, agenda adjustments. I need to add B to old business for the water district letter of support. Any other adjustments?
Are we talking about Jim,
Oh, what?
Jim?
We can do that under other business.
Okay.
Other business. We also need to add under new business, CEBE grant.
Oh, I thought you were giving me letters. I was like, all that mean?
Yeah, CEBE.
Well, it didn't make sense.
Anything else? Okay. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Make a motion, go into executive session for one MRSA subsection 4056A.
All those in favor? Okay. And we're going to step away for executive session and we will be back shortly.
Okay.
Back to life. All right, and we are out of executive session at 18:15. Can I get a motion?
Motion. To follow the highway foreman's recommendation.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to follow the highway foreman's recommendation. All those in favor? Moving on to approval of the minutes from our regular meeting on April 10th.
Make motion to approve as read.
I have a motion to approve the minutes as read. Did you want to correct that spelling or?
No, I'm not
Okay.
gonna worry about it. I've felt that way so many times, it's no big deal.
Motion to approve is read. All those in favor? All right, and I seconded that. I'm going to push off AvCog until I see her connect in. She hasn't connected yet, but we'll.
Kathy told us 6:25, didn't she?
Well, that's the thing, I think we may, so I'll just skip to the next one and then we'll come back when I see her connect.
Okay.
So, Water District Letter of Support. I'll check here in the file. So Sean's looking for, the Water District is looking for us to sign a letter of support, for Susan Collins' office. The letter reads, Dear Senator Collins, this letter is in support of the Canton Water District and their proposed well supply project to replace the current surface water supply after losing a third of their customers in the 2007 FEMA buyout. This project will put the water district in a sustainable position for years to come. Respectfully submitted, from the selectmen's names underneath.
And the reason we need that is because we're updating all of our information, because all the money's been held back on everything, as we all know that. So we need to update all of our information.
Motion to approve, or to sign, or however you wanna say that,
And we can't,
cause it's only you and
because
I.
we're short.
Yep.
Yep, we are short a quorum on that vote, so we will, I'm in support of it.
Can we sign it, see if Christine can run down and,
That's,
Yeah.
we can, if we're all in agreement, then I'm in agreement, you're in agreement.
Yeah.
I will, we'll send the letter forward to, Christine and see. What her thoughts are, and if we're all in agreement, then we can go ahead and sign a letter of support and move
Yeah.
forward.
Are you gonna see her?
I'll message her tonight and ask her, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was supposed to scan that copy to them tonight.
Yeah, no, I will, I'll reach out to her tonight and we'll get an answer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll sign it, oh, yes, sit down.
All right, let's go on to new business. New business, we have a resignation letter from our CEO, Scott Mills, which, we all received by email, and I should write it up. You have the,
I didn't have a
Okay.
copy on me, I can go get it.
nope, it's all good, I can pull it up.
Alright.
That's weird.
Once things cooperate here, we can pull it up. To the Town of Canton Select Board, fellow employees, Canton residents, dear Select Board employees and residents of Canton. After much deliberation, contemplation, consideration, and witnessing the passing of friends and relatives near and dear to me, and at my age, I've come to the conclusion it's time to enjoy life and let the younger generation with new and fresh ideas and energy take over. I've enjoyed the past 3 years helping the residents of Canton pursue their dreams of home ownership, but at this time, I need to put my life first and enjoy what time I have left on this earth. Excuse me. Cheryl and I plan to spend more time traveling and enjoying this great country we live in. It is, to say the least, a bittersweet moment, but I must do this before I find myself out of time. Please accept this as my official resignation. I will continue to serve the town until May 9th, after which I will conclude any plumbing inspections from permits I issue prior to the 9th. Best of luck, Scott Mills, CEO LPI.
Motion to accept.
I'll second it, but with some comments. Do we do a exit interview with these people? And they.
We have, yes,
Again with him?
we can, yeah,
I'd like to talk to him.
yeah, usually what we do is we come up with 6 or 8 questions or so and send it by email, or we have done it in person before as well.
I'd rather talk to him in person.
Yeah.
Even if I have to just go do it myself, just see if he has any suggestions.
Mhm. Yep.
Code enforcement officer.
As a fun aside, I received a phone call from Livermore today. They're also looking for, they wanted to know if we had anybody we could send down there to help out from time to time. I said, no.
So there's
Because
3
driven by
tabs.
lately.
Yeah.
Got it on the sign out front.
Yeah, I'd say Hartford has it posted for them as well, because Scott was Hartford, so.
What about Peru? I wonder if they've ever found anybody.
Peru is still using the temporary guy that we've had. So no, we don't have one.
So there's 4 towns at least that need,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
so I think we need to sit down and pool resources and talk with 4 towns and say. Cause that's a more enticing offer to.
It is, but I'll be honest with you, the last time it was a waste of time. We sat down with Hartford and we didn't get anywhere. We asked some questions and I think Peru was here,
Peru,
cause
yeah, cause
Jeff Dahl or Jason.
Jason,
No, yeah, cause Dahl, he was here.
yeah, and so
And
was.
we all said it's a need, and at the end of the meeting, we were nowhere and there was never.
Well,
any
Gail and
communication
I
back.
had, well, Gail and I did email back and forth, but at that point, neither one of us had anybody that was applying for anything,
Yeah,
but.
yeah, I mean, it's not that I'm against it, I just think last time it was kind of, we didn't get very far.
No, but I mean, my thought process being, if you're trying to hire somebody, 4 towns would be. A better paycheck for them than 1 town.
Mhm.
So,
It's a full-time job for somebody.
exactly,
It is,
so, maybe that's something we need to consider is,
we can try.
we're never gonna know unless we try.
Yeah, the hard part's gonna be, we also need to figure out coverage for starting.
Right. Yeah,
Cause
no,
we're in the heart of building season and,
we've, had the boards covered it before.
well, the hard part is the people on the board that have covered it are no longer here.
No, but maybe
And-
that
and
person
I-
would be willing to do a couple.
How
Right.
come this doesn't fall back on the planning board?
Some of it used to, the LPI stuff never has.
No, I
Um,
just didn't have one.
The code enforcement, some of that used to for the regular permits, but, and then commercial have to go through the public hearing process and stuff anyways, but. It could. If we wanted to.
Until we find somebody.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember when several people come walking down my road from the planning board.
Yeah, no, we would have to. Meet with the planning board, and let them know that's the intent. But, and if they're even willing to take it on.
Wow. I think we need to meet with them.
Okay.
But my understanding is that's why. Scott took on New York and. I think he should have, it's because people didn't wanna wait 2 weeks for a permit.
That was the biggest, and it was not just 2 weeks, it was usually longer than that. Because it was the time period of their meeting, and then going to look at it, and then waiting for the next meeting, and. That was pushing a month or more on some of them, and it didn't work out very well. And that's why we started doing more of it on the CEO end of things and. Because the other thing that, the hard part is the planning board wouldn't do any of the other pieces of the CEO, like visiting. Places that we want cleaned up or things like that. Which I thought we were gonna have a complaint on one to deal with tonight, but it hasn't come in yet. But, oops.
So Aaron, could either you or Kathy send an email to those other 3 towns and ask if it's something they would be interested in, is maybe hiring a full-time CEO to split, CEO/LPI to split between the 4 towns?
All right, so, we have a motion on the floor to accept Scott's recommendation, or resignation letter, sorry.
He seconded.
And a second, okay? So I have a motion. And a second, all those in favor of accepting Scott's resignation / retirement? All right, and now I will go step back into old business for AvCog, since I see that Amy has joined us.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi. So with me, I have Peter Shear. He's from TRC Environmental. He's AvCog's qualified environmental professional firm that we work with to oversee our brownfields program. So I'm assuming that is what the purpose of the meeting is. So I had him join us in case there were any technical questions that I wasn't able to answer.
We're trying to get you up on the screen, so.
No problem.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that.
Full screen. Full screen.
All right. Yeah, so I think we were just kind of looking for a little more information on the process, on what we would need to go through. The process as we were told before, it would have to be transferred to a nonprofit to make it happen. And I guess I have some questions in terms of time frame on if the town turns it over to a nonprofit to have the cleanup done, how quick can it be turned back afterwards? Are there any stipulations in the funding that says anything about timeframes, or anything like that?
I'll let Pete kind of talk about that a little bit, but I can just start with, kind of an overview of how the process works, and then we can get into that. So I think, we've talked about this project, I think maybe 2 years ago, we were approached about this. And we're trying to do everything we could, to figure out the eligibility for the program. And then we were approached about this project again. And our understanding is that there's potentially the water district or a nonprofit that would be interested in acquiring the property to facilitate the remediation of that building, to, do whatever the town determines and need, that the best use for that property is. So in order to do that, the first thing that needs to be done is whoever is going to acquire that building needs to have what's called a phase 1 environmental site assessment complete. So even if you've had one done in the past, those don't last forever. They're only really good for 6 months. So you need to have another one, and it needs to be on behalf of the entity that would be purchasing it. In this case, AvCog does have both a brownfields assessment program where we have grant funds that would allow you to do that assessment with the brownfields program. And then we also have a brownfields cleanup revolving loan fund, which is what is used to do the actual remediation. So in this case, acquiring the property, do a phase 1 prior to acquisition, that entity acquires the property. Then they work with the consultants to come up with a cleanup plan, do the planning around it, and move right into remediation of the property. So they need to own it. They need to be managing that project the whole time from that phase 1 all the way through the cleanup. I'll turn it over to Pete if he has anything to add more about the process and then how that works. But
yeah, the eligible nonprofit will need to own the property through the cleanup grant from AvCog. Once the property is cleaned up and remediated and we close out the grant, then the town can do whatever you'd like to redevelop the property, transfer the property to another developer or back to the town. But that new entity, the town currently as the current owner is not eligible, but flipping it to a nonprofit that we talked about would be eligible with the phase 1, as Amy mentioned, and they would have to own it through the duration of the cleanup. Again, once it's cleaned up, the town can then redevelop or transfer the property to whoever they would like to after the cleanup. But the eligible entity for the cleanup must own it for the duration of the cleanup.
So that means they would assume any liability risks at that point?
Say that one more time, the question.
Whoever it gets turned over to for this process would have to assume the insurance liability on it?
Well, yes, the insurance. I mean, the reason for doing the phase one environmental site assessment is to provide some environmental liability protections. You cannot be the responsible party for the contamination. In this case, we're talking about hazardous building materials, asbestos, lead-based paint. You know, the town owned it at a time when, you know, the lead-based paint and asbestos and the construction of the building, you know, was conducted. So, and you didn't have a phase one site assessment completed before you acquired it from the school district, or and then you know, I know it's changed hands a couple of times, but in either case, we've already went through the eligibility on the town's behalf to see if you guys would be directly eligible as you are now. The answer is no. But the new entity that acquires it will have a phase one site assessment that will show that they are not responsible for the contamination that's present. Therefore, they are eligible then to get the cleanup grant and clean up and or redevelop. A lot of times, you know, we're flipping it to turn, you know, or transferring the property to a developer who's looking to develop the property, you know, as a nonprofit, you know, Vesta Housing or other housing folks like that. In this case, you know, the water district or some other eligible entity, we identified the water district as probably the best fit for you guys, where, you know, they transfer to them, they do the cleanup work, and then it can come back to the town. So in terms of insurances, yeah, I mean, if you guys want to make sure you have just general liability insurance, you know, for protection, that would have to be, you know, subject, you know, between you and whoever that nonprofit is, to make sure that you have those protections in place. That's, you guys can have a separate agreement and make sure that those insurances and those policies are in place. But in terms of environmental, to make you eligible, the phase one environmental site assessment provides those environmental liability protections.
Thank you.
Peter.
And you guys can have a, sorry, and you guys can have a sep. We've done this many times. You guys are not unique. This has happened multiple times with EPA. You guys can have a separate memorandum of agreement with the, you know, the nonprofit, and have that as, you know, as sidebar agreements on what you guys want to do. But again, the basic stipulations is that the eligible nonprofit, when I say eligible, meaning if they have a phase one done on their behalf before they acquire it, that's part of the eligibility for them as a nonprofit. And then they would be eligible to receive the cleanup funding. They must own the site during cleanup. And then you guys, after the cleanup and the grant is closed, then you guys can move forward with whatever your future redevelopment plans are.
So the funding that's available, does that cover the entire cost of cleanup, or is there a local share? Either from the nonprofit or from somebody else that would have to kick in to help with the cleanup cost?
So for this particular program currently, as it is, AvCog's had a couple of different grants for cleanup through EPA. This funding actually came through the BIL, the infrastructure law, and it doesn't require match. Generally, it does require 20% match. So we would look at that, and you know, we don't necessarily need to require it for this particular funding source that we're currently using.
And I just, you know, dawned on me, the town, and you guys may be new to the select board and may have not remembered, but the boat launch in your town years ago, that was an EPA brownfields funded cleanup grant. That was, you know, some assessments were done, and then at the time I was working for Ransom Consulting. I now work for TRC, but we assisted the town with getting the cleanup grant, and we worked on that. Nick Sabatine was the former project manager on that project. I worked side by side with Nick and Steve on that project with you guys. So I'm not sure if you guys, any of you guys are familiar with that.
That was a little bit different, and AvCog helped with it, but it was an application directly to EPA. See, in this instance, you're not applying directly to EPA for the cleanup funding. You're going through a program that we already have. So
Oh.
at that time, we didn't have our own program. And then we said, we need to have a program for our region so that we don't have to compete at the national level. We can just provide it for our member communities to have access
Exactly.
to. So that, we began that in 2015. So the project that Pete was talking about, we helped to apply directly. So now we don't need to apply directly. It's just through our current allocation that we have.
Right. But the programmatic requirements will be very similar,
Yeah,
but
they're
we
the
can
same.
assist you.
It's the same program. It's just you're going through us rather than going to EPA, which is a competitive process. It's once a year. It's, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's that process all over again, really.
Okay.
So the one thing I would say is, anything related to the transferring of the property, any MOU, like that's not something that we can be part of that, for our program. So that would all be, for you to figure out, whether that means, an attorney or whatever. But, we can only facilitate the process of, okay, let's do the phase one. Okay, you give us, okay, the property's been transferred. We have all that documentation. We can submit it to EPA. We get it all approved and we get it through the program. So that's,
Eligibility. We can facilitate the eligibility and
yes,
advise on
that
that
part.
front. Exactly. And the environmental.
Yeah.
And the funding that covers just the cleanup, right? Not any redevelopment.
No.
Correct.
Okay. And then
And even when we're talking demolition, I mean, Pete is more technical. So if I don't say this right, but my understanding is when you're looking at remediation, you can only do demolition when it's required because of the remediation. So, if there's, in this instance, there may be plenty of, right? But we really don't know that for sure at this point.
Right. We were
To fully
looking
demolish.
into, right. We're looking into, I think we can at least do partial demolition with if that's the ultimate
If
goal
that's
is
what
to
you do,
demolish.
yeah.
Yeah, if that's the
Yeah.
ultimate goal is to not reuse the building, but to do the abatement and demolition together and demolish the building, we can look into a little bit more on the eligibility of the demolition costs in addition to the abatement of hazardous building materials as part of that. And some of the ways we can look at that is we have to make it's case by case with EPA, but we have to make a case to EPA that the building is from a safety standpoint needs to be demolished at the same time as we're doing the cleanup or the abatement, or we need to do some partial demolition so that we can provide safe access to the building to do the rest of the cleanup, or we need to clean up beneath the building and things like that. So we would look at the safety condition of the building and whether that's an argument to get the demolition included with the remediation or the abatement of hazardous building materials. We've been successful in doing that. And certainly we can ask and try to get that eligibility for you if you want to try to include at least partial demolition or all the demolition as part of the package. Typically, they also like to see then that it's a combined one project that you're hiring a contractor that does both the abatement work and the demolition. Essentially, doing a cost benefit analysis for the project that should, you're not having multiple contractors and multiple contracts, that you're doing it with one contract, one contractor, which will make your, the brownfields dollar go farther.
I think ultimately the building needs to be torn down. Structurally, the roof is starting to have some issues from the looks of it when we put a drone up over the building. And then also just the amount of issues and stuff in the building, it's gonna have to best to be torn down, I think, but
And that's
Yeah,
the case we can make DPA to have it, as part of the cleanup project. But again, I can't right now, the demolition for the sake of demolition alone is not an eligible activity. But if we can couple it with the cleanup, like I said, from a safety standpoint or structural condition, or we have to do it as part of the abatement in order to safely abate the project, then EPA has been fairly reasonable with that.
yeah.
unless it is determined that you do want to look at potential other uses for it. I mean, a lot of these old schools and things end up becoming housing projects or things like that. They're usually good for those, but it depends on the condition of the current building.
I think the hard part with that building is not only is it not in good shape. It's also sitting right in the middle of the floodplain, so I.
Oh,
to
yeah,
me,
yeah,
it's-
that's right.
Yeah, to me, it's not something I would
I re-
recommend for
Yeah, I
anything
remember
in
this.
public.
I wasn't thinking about that, but yes. Yeah, so I mean that's something all through the process in terms of, what we can probably get a lot of that done. It's just not guaranteed like you're gonna be able to do the whole entire demolition with the
Will the phase one assessment determine this?
Phase one, we could do a site reconnaissance and we can then ask EPA for concurrence or make the request to EPA on covering the demolition as part of that process. But the phase one is really just an environmental assessment. It's a desktop study. We look into the history of the project. We look for recognized environmental conditions, and then that essentially provides the liability protections for your prospective new owner. In this case, the nonprofit.
So it's really when you come up with your cleanup planning, right? I mean, you're doing that determination with EPA where you would determine what extent can be eligible activities, like after the phase one is my point.
Yeah. Typically, we look into those details when you fill out the application to AvCog's program. We'll start diving into those details in terms of eligibility. We'll confirm that, the process for the phase one environmental site assessment on behalf of the applicant, which will be the nonprofit. And then at the same time, we'll then start looking into what the full request is. And if you want to do the abatement and proper demolition, and the safety could, because of safety concerns, we'll have, put that in your application that due to the safety concerns or structural instability of the building, we're looking for funding to do both the abatement and demolition as part of the proposed project. And then we then take it to EPA to get all final determinations at that point.
Well, what I'm understanding is that can't be determined until the nonprofit takes it over, right?
Correct.
So the nonprofit's not gonna take it over if there's half the building left there. Because they're not gonna be able to get rid of it.
So say this again.
Well, he's saying that until that happens and they have assurance that what can be covered, then they wouldn't want to take it over, knowing that it wouldn't be able, half the building would be.
Right. The only thing we could do is, we could reach out to EPA ahead of time and see if we can get a preliminary, decision from them to see if they're, but ideally it'd be, again, and it doesn't actually, you don't have to necessarily transfer the property to the nonprofit to apply. The nonprofit can apply with the, conditionally that they are going to acquire the property and that they won't, AvCog's not going to issue a sub-grant agreement until the nonprofit has taken ownership and has the phase one done on their behalf before acquisition. So, there's a chance, there are some things that we could do ahead of time and still have the application come in and we can kind of vet this without having the transfer of the property go through yet.
Right, and I'm Sean from Cannon Water District, plus a select board member.
Yeah.
So
Hi, Sean.
where I'm coming from is my trustees aren't gonna accept this building unless it's gonna be totally torn down. Nothing left there, because we're not gonna be able to get rid of this building back to the town. Why would the town take it back if it's half torn down?
Well, then what I would suggest, so my suggestion would be you can, if you are going to be the entity, Sean, and the water district is going to be the nonprofit, you guys can essentially like a pre-application. It's, you complete the application to AvCog and you don't necessarily need to acquire it yet, but go ahead and complete the application as the applicant. And then AvCog will work forward from there, assuming that anything that, any approvals are conditional on the fact that you do acquire the property and that you do close on it and you have a phase one done as a condition of acquisition. But with that application to AvCog's program, we can then start the process with EPA to get final determinations. You don't have to move forward and actually acquire it yet. Like I said, you're completing an application on your behalf to the program, and AvCog is going to, if they do a commitment letter or anything like that, they're going to make all these things conditional that yes, they'll provide the funding to you, provided that you actually acquire it and take title to the property, and that you have a phase one done on your behalf before you acquire it, and you meet the rest of the, eligibility requirements. And at that point, then you close, and then the funds then are available.
And
Well,
I
I
believe,
think,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's almost like a planning board conditional approval. Sometimes you guys come to planning board, and the town will approve a project conditional on, that they install buffers, or they get their final permits and things like that. So, it's essentially a conditional approval. You're applying, but you're not necessarily taking the property yet.
well, and I
But
think,
taking the property will be, one of those conditions.
I think the hard thing is because of the history in town with this building, it's been given to a town group at one point for them to
Oh,
take
yeah,
it over,
you-
clean it up, Friends of Canton School, etc. Some things went sour, it didn't go well, the town ended up with it again. So I think ultimately, as a select board member, I don't feel comfortable, even though by town meeting warrant, the board of selectmen has the authority to transfer property. I don't personally feel comfortable doing that. I would prefer putting it in front of the town vote to, hey, this is what the plan is. It's gonna be transferred over to the nonprofit to go through the cleanup demolition process and then transferred back by disagreement or whatever. My preference would be to have the town vote on that, but the hard part with that is if we don't have some stuff to tell the town on how it's gonna work. So I guess that would be the hard part, is just figuring out the process in terms of timing and everything around the phase one and when that information comes in, the conditional stuff. How we can make that all work.
And that's what we're here to provide, that information to you guys, educate you on the program, help you understand it a little bit better so that you guys can decide. I mean, ultimately, unfortunately, the town as it sits now is not eligible because you guys are in the chain of title for the property. And unfortunately, because of you're in the chain of title, you are considered a responsible party for the conditions that are there. That's unfortunately, typically a municipality and nonprofits are eligible for this funding, but you can't be, responsible for the contamination. Unfortunately,
Right.
in this case, you are. That's why we're looking to do, for lack of a better term, find a way that might work. And so transferring to another nonprofit or another municipal entity or something like that would to be eligible. It can't be the town of Canton, unfortunately. So it has to, in this case, would have to be a nonprofit.
Yep, no, that makes sense. And I understand it. Like I say, I'm just trying to,
Yeah,
I
I
know the
know.
way, the history of how that building has been dealt with, so I'm just trying to make it so that
Right.
when we're ready to go through the process, that everybody in town understands why it's being done that way and
Right.
how we can
Right.
make it happen.
No
Yeah,
matter
that's
how,
just,
because no matter how this goes down, should we start a phase one?
I think so.
Well, the thing with the phase one is it has to be done within 6 months prior to the transfer of the property.
Right.
So
Our
like
town
6 months. Well, what month are we? We're in May, whatever. So does that get you to October or November? Like the property has to be transferred, acquired by that new entity 6 months within that 6 month period.
Right.
So if we do one,
we
you would
want to be
have to
ready.
then.
Yeah, we want to be ready that within the next 6 months, you will transfer that property. So
Mhm.
otherwise we have to redo the phase one. It's just, we can, but it doesn't make sense to keep updating phase ones. We'd rather wait. I guess what Amy's trying to say is we'd rather wait until you know for sure that you are going to transfer and that this process makes sense to you in the town.
Well, our town meeting is in June, so the chance of having an idea if the demolition could be included is probably slim to none, right?
Well, again,
When's
we
the
can ask.
meeting?
June,
June what?
It's the second Thursday.
Yeah.
I wanna say
So
it's
like-
the 12th.
12.
We
Okay,
can
so
reach
it's
out. I mean, we know enough. We have the hazardous building materials. We know the condition of the building, and I think we can. I think we can make the case that we can talk to our EPA project officer and just kind of get a sense on whether they think this is an eligible activity for the demolition.
yeah, I mean, I think we can let us do that. Like, we can do that right away. Like, talk to EPA directly about this project. Like, everything that we know, what we do, and let's get feedback on that so that we can, if we are, feeling like not, this isn't going to happen in that way, then maybe we'll get a better sense. But if we should do that first and then get back to you with
Yeah. And I'm not,
whether we move right into the phase one and start doing that, or we just work on what you want to present to a town meeting, whatever.
right. And I'm gonna say the obvious. The obvious is without doing this or this funding, there's a chance that this building remains a liability for the town, and the town
Right.
will then be responsible for it through town, taxpayer money to deal with it. And or it sits there for another 10 years and continues to, get worse. So, that's kind of your argument when you go to the town in terms of why this process, you need to do it this way. It's because this is great, funding that's available for these types of projects to help towns just like yourselves, get over some of these hurdles.
And even if it doesn't fully pay for every part of the demolition, I mean, at some point, you may then be responsible for the whole cost of what it takes to remove the building, right? So,
Right, I think that's kind of gonna be the question that I'm assuming people are gonna pose to us is, so. This is the process you guys are gonna wanna go through, what is that costing the town? And I'm concerned, I don't think we're gonna have that, we're not really gonna know that. Cause I think we won't know that until phase one or phase two.
Right. Well, it's the demolition piece. So it's, we know that all the abatement that's been identified, the hazardous building materials that have been identified in that report that was done on behalf of the town through Maine DEP's program, the costs that are associated with that, that's what our initial preliminary costs are. We know that those are all covered with AVCOG's, the abatement of asbestos and universal waste and all that. That would be eligible under the cleanup. What we're really talking about is just the demolition following the abatement of those hazardous building materials. And we will ask EPA that and see if we can get that.
but it may be that the way you have to present it at town meeting is, we know these for sure. We can't guarantee that the demolition is going to fully or be covered, right? I mean, if we won't probably, I don't even think if we talk to them that we can get 100% assurance of that. We can probably get a good feeling for that based on the information that we provide them. We can, right? But I don't think if you're going to present it at a town meeting that we would necessarily be able to say, yeah, 100%. We know it's going to be. So I think that will always probably have to be a, something that isn't sort of an unknown.
And I think there's two things here. We'll ask EPA for on the eligibility of the demolition, but has the town reached out to even get a ballpark quote on demolition from maybe a local contractor? Maybe that's something you.
The last one that was done was in 2007 when the bio process went through town. There was a quote on it at the time, but that's long outdated now.
Because this is federal funding and a sub-grant, ultimately the cleanup, and if demolition is eligible, that'll have to be competitively bid. And if it's under 250,000 for a contract, we just need to reach out and get 3 quotes. If it's greater than 250,000, or you guys have an ordinance in the town that says you have to publicly bid it, then we'll have to publicly bid it. But ahead of that, I didn't know if there's somebody a local demolition contractor that can give you a quote. So at least we have a ballpark.
Yeah.
If not, we might be able to do that, what we call cleanup planning. When we do the phase one site assessment through AVCOG's program, we could, maybe have a little bit of cleanup planning and reach out to a couple of contractors to see if we can get a quote or at least a ballpark estimate of what we're looking at for demolition.
So that brings up the question of, considering the current political climate, what are the chances that this funding is frozen?
I knew that you were going to ask that question. and I would be like a miracle worker, right? If I could give you that 100% answer, right? All I can tell you about that is this money has been allocated, right? We were awarded these funds. They're sitting there for us to use. To date, we've been able to draw down on our brownfields program for assessments and things that we've been doing. But like anything else, if in a month from now we find out that the brownfields program is all of a sudden frozen or something, then that, but we have no indication, all I can tell you right now, of that.
Okay,
Makes sense.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep. One of
And-
those
and
things
also-
I can't determine that, but
Who
And
can?
also understand too, the town too, moving forward. AvCog has the funding right now. It was just, awarded last year. They have the funding in place. It's a first come, first serve based on projects coming, being applied for. So that's why we're suggesting, we've known about this for a little while. We knew about it, even a year or two ago. And like I said, AvCog has funding now. There's no guarantee where they'll be a year or two from now. We make supplemental when the money goes out, EPA asks us each year, do we want supplemental funding to recapitalize the program? But that's also based on having, the current funding drawn down at least 70%. So understand that, now's a good time. But there's no guarantee where AvCog will be next year based on other projects coming into the program.
Right,
yeah, that's,
Yes.
that's for sure, because we do have, we can keep kind of a list, but if somebody comes to us and we're not ready, like we can, we have to move forward with somebody else, then, there is a chance right now we have, we have $1 million in this cleanup revolving loan fund, but some of the housing projects we work with are like $500,000 cleanup projects. So
If we start that
AvCog's
out,
capped at and AvCog's capped at 50% in terms of
yeah,
what
for
can go out
sub
of the
grant.
sub grant.
So we can't use all of that money to grant. We have to do loans. So like a private developer can't get a grant anyway. They're not eligible for a grant. They can only get a loan. So anyway, Sean, were you going to ask a question?
yes, if we start that application process, will that tell us that much sooner if we're qualified for complete cleanup?
Yeah,
Or at
we're
least
gonna.
maybe.
We're like we said, we're gonna at least get a preliminary. We're gonna ask EPA in the next few weeks if get a preliminary determination. But yes, Sean, if you guys fully apply and then AvCog can move forward and we can get a full determination.
And it has,
from
the
EPA.
applicant has to be the entity who will own it.
Yeah,
Correct.
so we'll have to be in contact with you, Amy,
Yes.
nonprofit.
Yep. Yeah, and hopefully in, the next like week or two, we will be able to set up at a meeting, just Pete and I, with the project officer for EPA and have that conversation. But I can send it to you, Sean, so that you can see what you need to put in the application.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah, and if you have questions too, Sean, you feel free to reach out to us. If there's something you don't understand in terms of one of the questions, we can, you fill it out to the best of your knowledge. It's going to ask you questions in terms of what's your proposed cleanup plan, but it's also going to ask you questions, what's your proposed redevelopment plan? What's the public benefit? What's the goals here? And if there's certain things that you're not sure of, just feel free to reach out to us.
I definitely will.
Yeah, and if this gets to, you do take it to town meeting or whatever, we can help you with that, however we determine that you want to move forward. So
Do you guys happen to have from a prior project a sample MOU that we could look at?
I do not.
I do, but a couple of them are confidential.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I would say, and we typically like, any of those things, we like you to work behind the scenes between you and the district.
Yeah, like that's that's why I was saying, like, for the transferring of the property, everything associated with that is really, you're probably best to work with your attorney and come up with that, because we can't really do that side of it and be doing the program. So
Yep, no, that makes sense.
yeah, but if you have any questions, feel free, any of you, to reach out to me, and you can always CC Pete, because if there is something that gets too technical, then I lean on him. That's his job, is to do that part. I know enough, like I've learned enough to be dangerous about it, but then I'm always like, that's right?
Absolutely.
So it's always good to have him for that. So what we'll do is our next step will be to set up a meeting with EPA so we can have an initial conversation, just letting them be aware of this, what we're looking at, what's here, what we know about it, what we know about the building. And then we can follow up with you after that. I will also send Sean that application, just so you don't have to submit it right away. It's just for you to look at it and see what's included. It's not like a 20-page narrative application or anything like that, but it will require you to answer some questions and things.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect. Any other
Is
questions?
there anything else we can answer? No,
I
not
think
right
we're good.
now anyway. I know we
You
could
make
sit
them
here
all
all
stuff.
night asking questions, but
I think we
But-
have the important parts covered.
okay. And I think that's the best step going forward. We'll be in touch with you as soon as we have that meeting, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Thank
All
you for
right,
your help.
thank you. All right, have a good night.
Guys, you as
All right,
well.
bye.
Anything else on Opco for now?
No,
And if, when the water district trustees have a meeting to chat about it, if you wanna invite, I'm happy to come and
Absolutely.
chat and see if we can figure out a process or procedure to make it work and figure out how to make it go forward. I think it's something, it'd be interesting to see what the phase one brings back, if it's possible, not, how much could be included or not included, or
seems like they think they can make the case to have it included, which would be.
That was,
I think it.
that was the consensus before, they could be included, but they're obviously not gonna commit themselves.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Understandable,
yeah,
James.
But, and on our behalf, too, was, as you guys heard, we're not gonna take over the building.
Right.
And have a tap torn down,
Yeah.
it's a big project for.
right.
Yeah.
Water district.
Well, that was the only other question that I had that they really can't answer at this point, is just if it gets to a point that say, okay, the grant covers the remediation and all of that, but it doesn't cover demolition, is there anything in terms of timeframes? Is there a clock that starts
yeah.
ticking when the remediation
Yeah.
is done that says, okay, well, we've remediated it, but now it has to be torn down?
Yeah.
And if the nonprofit's not gonna do it, does that mean the town has to do it within, say, I don't know, 6 months?
Yeah.
Because then it would turn into a mess around getting money approved and stuff like that. So that was really the only thing, but like I say,
So it sounds like
Unfortunately, I
the
don't
only thing
vote
that
for a
we
while.
have, that not have to, but should do. In the interim is try to get a quote on demolition, so that they've got
Yeah.
something to work with.
Well, there is one through.
so Almighty did it the last time.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't remember if it's still in the property card file, or if that's,
It was on that thing that Michelle sent me,
okay.
it's on email.
Yeah, I was saying, I know I've seen it at one point, but I don't know when I've seen it. But yeah, no, I mean, we can always have them come back and look at it again. I mean,
Are
that's,
they even on my stuff?
Yeah.
yes. I think, the other thing I think we probably should do is start thinking about article language to put forward
Yeah.
at town meeting on.
Yep.
How we might wanna go about transferring, or the whole process, and how we wanna present that and all that kind of stuff, but we got a little bit of time to think of that, but something we should not actually be done, because we only got about
We do not.
2.5 weeks to,
Yeah.
2.5 weeks to figure it out, but we can. 3 weeks actually, because it's the end of the month that we have to sign it, so.
Yeah.
But, and depending on time frame and stuff, I mean, it's not something, we can always hold a special meeting just for that. So I mean, I don't wanna rush it and not have all the information. It may be that we may be better off just to add a straw poll question if we don't have enough information yet. We may be better off just to add a straw poll and say, okay, those of you in the room, this is what we're thinking for our overall process, thumbs up, thumbs down, what do people think? And then when we do get the phase one or whatever stuff back and get a little more information, then we can look at doing a special meeting just for that.
So we want the office to call Almighty for a quote. Did you get that, Aaron?
Sure. see if we can contact Almighty Waste and see about them coming in for a quote on, what it would cost to demolish the old school. Ballpark quote. Knowing that we would have to put it out to bid if it got to that
Right.
point, because it's.
Right, I mean,
That's,
because it sounds like. By their guidelines, if it's under this, then it's okay, but if it's over, then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. All right, moving forward, hopefully this doesn't die, so I can pull the email up. Next is the CEBE grant.
She's not alone.
Just to give everybody a heads up, we received an email. This past week, we were granted the CEBE grant. From the state. We had a very high score. If I can pull it up here, I can tell
Both
exactly what it
levels?
was. We received it for everything.
Okay.
Anything that we put in is
Yep.
what we received. The actual dollar figure I don't have yet. They're gonna be sending out. We received a conditional agreement, and there's a kickoff meeting the second week of May. Where I'm assuming we'll learn more. With the community action grant. The funding source that it's coming from are the Community Resilience Partnership, state budget allocation. Grant payment will be issued after the contract is signed. At the project completion, any remaining funds would have to be returned to the state. So our overall score was. That's just the number of recipients. There were many recipients, over 60 people or municipalities / groups actually received the grant. So town of Canton. I believe it was a 40 out of 60, I think. By town, it was a whole pile.
So we got everybody else's information too?
Well, this is just a public
Oh,
award listing. They haven't sent us our individual packet yet.
anyways,
They sent everybody's.
we scored high, that's all we need.
All right, Canton right here, so,
Exactly.
pass. Criteria 3, total points available were 5, we received 5. Criteria 4, 15, we received 15. Scope of work, points available was 60, we received a 40. So our overall score. Sorry, hang on. Total points available on budget proposal was 25, we received a 20. So like I said, we got a very high score really compared to some others that I saw on the award list. When I scrolled down through, so I think that's good. There were a couple things noted in there, but I'm sure it'll all be touched on. When we actually learn more, get our actual award information. I don't know, it didn't say anything about how much of the award was the award, how much was, local match funding, so I don't know any of that until we actually get the approval letters, but essentially the grant went through, so now we just gotta wait and see what we have in a couple weeks and go from there. But it sounds like we have some funding to do a couple projects that we put in for. They said, I didn't read all of it, but some of it was talking about the heat pumps at the fire department met under whichever category they had recommendations for. So I know because of the scores and the comments that were made in the scoring documents, it sounded like everything was on their good list. I did forward those to Kathy, so she can print them out if so we can all have a copy of them, but.
Yep.
So we have those.
And was it 3? Four. Keep track. Good number.
All right. Other business. The only other thing I had was, the chimney at the fire, the fire department, at the highway department. Are we gonna move forward or not on that, or what are we thinking? Andy asked me, and I had Ryan reached out to me as well, asking where we're at, and I said, oh, we'll check into it and get back to you. So,
Yeah, I guess. I personally wouldn't do it, but
So I know you were talking, and I remember the name of the unit you had said.
yeah, it doesn't make any difference. A condensing boiler, new boilers don't have chimneys.
Right.
They're so efficient.
Right. But. We don't, if we went that route, we'd have to factor in the cost of demolition of the old chimney, right?
No, because Andy can take it down in 5 minutes with that excavator. After I went down, a little bit, man, like 4x4 riser
mm,
in the floor.
Yeah.
That chimney sets on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to get someone to commit a standing seam to come in and do the roof.
There's gonna be a hole like 3x3 in the roof.
yeah,
Yeah.
That was the problem with the single flue chimney.
Right. And that's why they said they would do single fluid, but it would be the same width, that way we wouldn't have to mess with the roof.
And it is hot water, it's not a hot air furnace.
Okay,
Has two more diabetes and column like that.
yeah,
Hot water.
and the cost of that was what? Just out of curiosity,
A new furnace,
yeah,
a new furnace, $3,500, then you gotta pay price.
Yeah, we have to figure something.
Installed.
yeah, we got to.
It hangs on the walls. Like, half the size of the top of that cabinet, hangs on the wall, it's propane. It sticks out through the wall, but then
So it would have to be on an exterior wall.
has to be on the exterior wall. Or they can vent to the ceiling, but most of them are on the exterior wall.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. think.
Mine is actually, it goes up in my garage, it runs over
Mhm.
16 feet. It's 3.5 inch PVC pipe.
I was just trying to think of that building.
yeah,
It's just,
Thought the only
she could get a quote from her friend's guy for that.
Thought the only place to put it on an exterior wall would be the Western Star wall. Right?
what's,
Because in the back, there's, well, I don't know if there'd be enough room on the short wall. On the back of the building.
oh, well, that's what I was thinking, would you go right, basically behind where the current chimney is, on the back wall?
I guess we have to have somebody look at it, I don't know.
Yeah, best thing, if you're gonna kick this around, you better off just have your guy go down and have him go and give you an estimate. He give you a decent how it's gotta go down,
Yeah,
he give you a good estimate on.
yeah,
And then if you look at Dave's, you're almost better off going to the heat pump up there,
he and I talked about that.
but that's.
Yeah, hard part with that is that you gotta have something electric as backup,
True,
because heat pumps are no good under 15,
yeah,
or I shouldn't say no good, they're not efficient under
Yeah.
15.
Windows, 100 miles an hour there too.
Yeah,
yes, it is, kind of like my house.
okay, well, we can look into that some more.
Yeah, cause I honestly don't know.
I told the chimney person that we would get back to him, just put us on hold for now, and we would get back to him, so.
Yeah.
All right, any other business?
No,
Aaron, anything from the office?
Nope.
Okay. Approval of the warrants, AP warrant number 102, 18,465.38. 104, 942.75. Payroll warrant 101, 8,653.95. Number 103, 5,455 and that 39. And I get a motion. I have a motion. And I second.
Oh,
All those in favor? All right. Robin, do you have any public comment tonight?
Grass is getting green. I can't wait to see them all.
It's getting there, slowly, but we're getting there. All right, committee reports, the rec department is up and rolling, we have a lot of kids signed up, last count was over 100, 13 or 14 teams. So we've implemented Venmo for payments. That comes into a town-specific Venmo account, which goes into a specific bank account that is completely separate from everything else town. It is just specifically a rec department account for electronic payments. So that things stay completely separate and you didn't have to worry about anything else. We also have a credit card for rec, so that any snack shack stocking purchases get done directly on that instead of going through reimbursements. And trying to worry about receipts and everything, we figured that would keep it all in one small location, all easy to check if we ever needed to or had questions on something, it would all be on one card. So to try to limit reimbursements and also try to work with people that would give us tax exempt status when we can.
Yep.
So Kim's working on the signups and the Jersey end of it, hopefully we'll be ready to go here shortly, the ball field's starting to dry out. Bad, I know there's been some town kids in playing off and on, getting ready, so hopefully we're close. We also have somebody that is gonna come down and drag and disc both infields for us. We let them borrow our pitching mound and in return, they're gonna drag our fields for us, so that'll be done here shortly. I gotta reach out to him and see where he's at, but that'll be done here shortly and.
He told me to tell you to just talk to him. And he'd be glad to do.
Yep, no, he's
Yeah.
more than willing to do it.
Yeah.
We have approval. It's just.
Yeah.
Waiting on him to have time to come down and do it, so it should be anytime. When I talked to him last week, he was just working on when.
Yeah.
I met with planning board the other night, to chat about the cemetery ordinance and, the attorney's recommendations on changes and so moving forward with it, the town meeting. They approved the attorney's changes and that will be coming forward for a town meeting vote, in June. They're working on the comprehensive plan is close, but will not be ready in June. And the sewer ordinance is at the attorney's office for review currently. So they have that to look at going forward. I think that's all the committee reports I have.
I don't have any.
Or-
So are you guys good, the rec department?
Yeah.
Good with us running that water line
Yes,
up inside the fence?
yep, just let me know when you wanna do it, and we're happy to be around to help or whatever we gotta do. Yeah, I think it's probably better to do it inside the fence than out, that way we know where we're at. Mhm.
Do we know what's on our side property versus?
But,
Sean got a, estimate for the gate.
yep, we have it,
You can do it,
I don't know yet, we're gonna find out where the funding's coming from to do it.
so nobody jumps over the fence.
It happens. No, we just gotta figure out where the money will come from and then go from there.
A lot of where the money will come from.
There isn't, we can look at it now and do it if you want, but the only place that the funding exists is in the community benefit fund.
Yeah.
That's really the only location that there is funding at the moment for that.
Yeah. Just need to sit and wait until we figure
That's,
everything out.
yep. Nope, I think now that we have the quote, we know the number we need and we'll go from there. So. Perfect. Skip that one. So we are done for the evening. We have an executive session meeting left.
Did you do payroll warrants?
I did accounts payable and
Okay.
payroll together,
Okay,
and you motioned.
I know, I was just making sure that payroll was in there.
Yep, no, I read them all.
I was half awake, so.
Alrighty, Can I get a motion to go make it executive
Executive
session?
session, one MRSA subsection 405 6A.
Perfect. And actually, we'll take a 3-minute recess before we do that. But,
Okay,
and then we'll go into executive session.
okay,
All right.
over and out. God, dang it.
All right, getting in 7:20, right?
Yep. And I can let you know.
Yep,
I can shoot my message or whatever, let you know route.
perfect.
All right.
Okay.
Quite, quite.
You
Yeah.
like treated web?
Like asking if I like roofing. Yeah.
From the reports displaying the way to move it.
Did you get the access?
No,
Oh, I emailed you after, but you must have been on the road. I ended up.
I got that.
Okay.
I got
Send it
it.
to him or I was.
She did sure happy ass.
I know.
No, after that, so they, you obviously opened the ticket.
I spent
They
all
called
day
the
with her
office.
today.
I didn't have your number yet, but I ended up taking care of it.
Not enough.
They showed me that you still have the access to grant and deny you permission, so I granted you all the permission. They just changed where all that shit was, and I've
You
been
have to
busy
do
with my paper hanger all day, so.
QC trash.
Yeah, good times.
Huh?
But anywho.
I was giving QC trash.
How was this?
Good night.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna end it.
I can walk.
I'm just gonna end it. I don't think we need.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
we're
think
done
we-
with the back end anyway.
Do what now?
Huh?
How we
See you
doing,
later.
Tricia?
I'm okay.
Yeah, cool.